Welcome back, everyone. This will be my full Miss Marvel Episode 3 video. There was a whole bunch of Easter eggs. They answered a bunch of questions about the mythology, what her new origin story is. It's way different than what we expected, so we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos. And Thor Love and Thunder is going to be hitting theaters really soon. We're doing an IMAX ticket giveaway for the movie. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and just leave your favorite moment from the episode on the video. Also be posting all those Thor Love and Thunder Easter egg videos, post-credit scene videos after that movie comes out. Careful for spoilers for the episode if you haven't seen it yet. We'll just start at the beginning, talk about WTF moments, Easter eggs as we go along. Mostly like the real big stuff too, all this mythology that they explain in the episode. It was like a big info dump episode. But the title of episode 3 was Destined. It's meant to be a reference to a couple different things. It's a reference to the name of the race of people from that same dimension, as it seems like the group that the 10 rings in the Shang-Chi characters come from. It's also a reference to the X-Men group in the comics, Clan Destin. In the comics, they were an X-Men group that were descended from a Djinn. In the MCU now, they're saying that their whole race that they belong to are like these Djinn characters. They're not Inhumans, but they all have the same basic type of energy-based powers that they call Noor, like this inner light that you see Miss Marvel giving off when she's wearing that bangle. Like, they all possess this ability through their biology, but the members who are from the alternate dimension and have 100% alien DNA don't have as much access to the power as the mixed race beings like Kamala, who have part human DNA from the main MCU dimension. Kamran would be one of those beings too, like he has the exact same powers, he exists in the same way that she does. It's kind of the same thing with the Shang-Chi character too, where his mother comes from an alternate dimension and his father comes from the main MCU. Kind of like Star-Lord, where one of the parents has this crazy celestial level DNA, the other parent is just like a normal person. It's just the added twist with the Miss Marvel backstory now is that she is from an alternate dimension, or her race is from an alternate dimension. It just seems like it's the same dimension that we saw during the Shang-Chi movie.
The realm of Talos stretches far beyond the shores of our small village. We have cities that surpass any in your universe.
They also explain the Noor inside them, that inner light power, helps keep them looking young. So theoretically, if her great-grandmother resurfaces on the show in present day, she'd look the exact same too. I'm assuming that mixed race people like her grandmother will just age normally, like Kamala will age normally because she has part human DNA. It'll also explain in 10 years if the actress who plays Kamala Khan is still inside the MCU, still doing MCU movies, will look way older. The funny thing about them being Djinn is that they actually referenced that in earlier episodes when her brother tells her, "Oh, are you still afraid of the Djinn? Should I turn the nightlight on?" I think that was meant to be a clever wink on the reveal of the show. Like, yes, you should be afraid of Djinn, but not for the reason why you think you're afraid of them. Because they're going to try and force you to open that interdimensional portal, theoretically blowing up the planet again. Another planet-ending disaster. Usually when you talk about Djinn, you talk about them as being evil genies, but the text that her father reads to Bruno explains that they can also be good. So I know the biggest questions now are, does this mean she's 100% totally not an Inhuman? Does this mean that she's from the same race that Shang-Chi comes from that alternate dimension? And do the Bangles come from the same person who created the 10 rings? Because the markings on them seem very similar, even though they themselves seem just a little bit different in just the way that they work in general. Like, they both seem ancient, they both seem like they're from the same alternate dimension, but for instance, only Kamala and beings from their race seem like they can use the bangle in the same way. In Wenwu, for instance, doesn't have any special DNA and he was able to use the 10 rings just fine, just not quite as fully as Shang-Chi himself, who like Star-Lord has part alien DNA from this alternate dimension, theoretically giving him access to the true power of the 10 rings. But I know a lot of you are also asking, with the bangles that Kamala Khan is using, is this going to be like a Thor's hammer situation where we find out that Thor was generating the power himself the whole time, because they say that the power is coming from her biology and the bangle just kind of helped unlock that. So can Kamala Khan use the same power without the bangle eventually? She made all those comments about Asgardians and Thor. I feel like there was a missed opportunity on the show because she's such an Avengers fangirl for her to jokingly call herself the god of bangles. Like, what are you, the god of hammers? If it's the same situation with her and she can use the power without the bangles. That's also a possibility, but we haven't seen Shang-Chi do the same thing with the 10 rings yet. Like, will he be able to use the same power without the 10 rings eventually? That's something that they would answer in the Shang-Chi sequel movies. But Kamran's mother explained that their Djinn group was exiled to the main MCU dimension from that other dimension just a little over 100 years ago, so they've been on Earth way less than the 10 rings have been on Earth theoretically. But it sounds like this temple, the bangle itself, because the temple itself is literally a 10 rings temple, make it sound like the Bangles have been on Earth way longer than they themselves have been on Earth. But when I say that it's a 10 rings temple, if you look on the ground in the main chamber, they're the 10 rings symbol. So in ancient times, Wenwu's group just controlled this area of the world. I believe all the markings that they focus on around the walls, too, are meant to tell the story of the Ten Rings and the Bangles themselves, this ancient group of people. I think the reason they find the bangle on the severed Kree hand is just a reference to a couple different things. Like, it's a wink to the comic book Captain Marvel Nega Band's backstory, because they say that they changed her backstory in the first place so that it makes more sense with what they're doing in the Marvels, the Captain Marvel 2 movie. And in previous episodes, they make Marvel references to the Negabands, saying, oh, it feels like thought given form, and that's basically what the Negabands do. They turn mental energy into physical energy. And also during the Captain Marvel movie, the Kree say that they've been visiting Earth for a long, long time, so there were Kree on Earth in ancient times, and you have the Kree sleeper cells that they referenced during Spider-Man No Way Home. And it sounds like members from this Djinn race from the alternate dimension have been visiting Earth for a long time too. Like, the group that Kamala's great-grandmother comes from isn't the very first group on Earth from this alternate dimension, they're just one of the latest ones. Her father even says, the text says, that the Djinn come from pre-Islamic society, which is before the Middle Ages, which is like before the year 500, which means almost 2,000 years ago, which would be around the time that we saw the Ten Rings come, because Wenwu found them about 1,000 years ago. So it sounds like the Bangles came from this alternate dimension at some point in the distant past, like the same way that the Ten Rings came from this alternate dimension in the distant past. And at some point, the Kree learned about what was going on with this alternate dimension, and one of their race intermingled with someone from their dimension, and then one of their descendants wound up with the Bangle. So like, all this stuff with the severed Kree hand seems like it happened many, many, many years ago. But they'll clarify some of this backstory in future episodes. But I think this is all part of them explaining, like, yes, we are acknowledging her comic book backstory, that she was an Inhuman in Marvel Comics, she got her powers through the Terrigen Mist, the Inhumans come as this Kree experiment on humanity, but then they swerve on that in the MCU and say, oh no, instead she's from this Djinn race, from this alternate dimension, they're not the Inhumans. So they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, like, yes, we're winking at the comic book backstory and all these Easter eggs, but we're not actually doing it that way in the MCU. That's why I think the Black Bolt cameo during Doctor Strange 2, where they reference the Inhumans, the Terrigen Mist, is meant to be more straight-up comic book Inhumans like you remember, because they want to differentiate Kamala Khan's group, these Djinn characters, as being completely different. They also tease that all the members of their race have access to this Noor inside them to different levels, and the way they tease things at the end when the grandmother says, aren't you coming to learn about what was going on with the train, didn't you see it too? All the members of their race from this alternate dimension, not just from her family line, saw visions of this train, meaning that Kamala's mother also saw the train as well. Even her brother might have seen the train. Like, her mother would have that same Djinn DNA, and it seems like she knows way more than she's letting on. Like, that might have been the reason why she ran to America so many years ago, like she was trying to get away from all of this. They also confirmed that when they bail, during that big fight in the 1940s here in the temple, they never saw her great-grandmother again. In the flashbacks, they also say they think the British during that era stole the other bangle from the temple, so I'm assuming that they'll find the other bangle when they go back to Pakistan. Kamala Khan only wears one bangle in the comics, but in the comics, she's got a completely different backstory. She's an Inhuman, she's not a Djinn, she's not from an alternate dimension or anything like that. In the comic book version of the bangle, it doesn't have any kind of special powers like this one. It's just like a regular family heirloom that's passed down through her line that her ancestor wore during partition and hid money in. For those of you asking too, like, why do they look the way they do if they're all from this alien race of Djinn? Like, do all the people from this alternate dimension all look exactly like humans? I think the idea is that because we're talking about a completely alternate dimension here, they don't all look like this. Like, there are many different races of people, many different cultures, because it's like an entire alternate dimension, alternate universe of people. It's just that when they were exiled to planet Earth, they say that they moved around a lot to try and stay hidden. They probably just modified their appearance and just adopted the cultures of wherever they live, the accents, so that they could better blend in. Just to also explain how this could have been a Ten Rings temple in India, because in the backstory of the Shang-Chi movie, they basically explain that his character is the mythical Genghis Khan that conquered pretty much the entire known world at the time. It's just with the rise of modern technology, it became harder for him to manage an empire that big and still stay in the shadows, so eventually he moved their organization to the shadows, and it just sounds like this temple is left over from that early period when he was ruling like a normal conqueror, like ruling over the entire world. But because the power of the Ten Rings seemed like they helped keep him young for so long, it seems like he used Noor, or like whatever this inner light power is, within those 10 rings to stay young, the same way that Kamala Khan and these other people have that power within them. Also explaining how the race of people that Shang-Chi's mother comes from, these alternate dimension beings, can also live so long. You also remember her grandmother's story made it sound like when they were boarding the train later during partition, during this era here, it sounds like her great-grandmother used the bangle to help her grandmother as a child board the train. But then they say right after that she completely disappeared, no one ever saw her again, even though the bangle itself stayed in their family's belongings. The vision of the train they see looks like it's meant to be the same train from that day on partition that she referenced. I also think it's meant to be a visual metaphor, like the train represents their passage between different dimensions. They never fully explain what their group was exiled for in the first place, but they're meant to be one of the villain groups on the show, so whatever it was, it sounds like it was pretty bad. But I think the idea with their group is they at least want you to sympathize with them for a hot second. Like, that's why Kamran seems like he's trying to turn good against his mother. Like, no, don't do this. We don't want to hurt them. It's kind of like that Shang-Chi energy where he's born to one of the villain groups. Like, no, I'm not going to be evil like you, father. But they want you to at least sympathize with Kamran's mother in their group because they just want to go home, even though they're now theoretically threatening to destroy the entire Earth in the process, or at least blow a giant chunk in it. They say they need about the same amount of power as the output of the sun. So they're basically saying that if it does go wrong, it would destroy the Earth in another Eternals level event like the Emergence. Everyone pour one out for the MCU and the Earth in the last couple of years, just can't catch a break. First you have Thanos in Avengers Endgame, Tiamat is still there, and the Ms. Marvel series is supposed to take place after the events of Spider-Man No Way Home, meaning the Eternal Celestial is still just chilling out in the Indian Ocean. Then you have Spider-Man and Doctor Strange messing with reality, threatening to create even more incursions, so just RIP Earth in general. Also, side note too, when they go back to Pakistan, it seems like in episode 4, maybe they'll reference that dead celestial in the Indian Ocean because they're literally going to that part of the world. I'm not going to hold my breath on that, but that would be pretty funny. Like, you'll see a lot of comments about that. Like, wait a minute, where's that dead celestial? How come they're not talking about that more? Think about all the TikTok and the Instagram influencers that would be trying to get pictures of themselves on the dead celestial. Like Flash Thompson trying to get a picture of himself on that celestial. We'll also see if Kamran's mother was also lying about what really happened to her great-grandmother. She claims she never saw her again and she just disappeared, quote-unquote, but they could have killed her or she could have been captured by whoever has the other bangle. It also sounds like they're building up towards a moment at the end of the series, like you saw at the end of the Shang-Chi movie, where you have Wenwu and Shang-Chi both fighting each other with half of the 10 rings. Where like towards the end of the series, you see Ms. Marvel fighting someone else like Kamran or whoever else can use the bangle, with each of them having similar powers looking kind of like this. Later, when she's explaining everything to Bruno, she references not being related to Thor, not being Asgardian, not being an alien, but technically being from an alternate dimension. You would say that her family are aliens on this planet. You can also see she's wearing an Iron Man t-shirt in this scene too, because there's Avengers merch, the Avengers themselves have all become pop culture icons. Sounds like from Falcon and Winter Soldier, with him failing to earn any money, getting any bank loans or anything like that, that not all of them are earning money off of their merch sales though. Some of that must be like bootleg merch. Bruno also references Eric Selvig's research into interdimensional travel and wormholes. That's a reference to all the research that he did during the Thor movies on the Bifrost, and Jane Foster's research too. Like, they all did the same kind of research during those movies. The other big subplot in the episode is this whole damage control Spider-Man No Way Home plot with their agency coming for Ms. Marvel, just hitting all the temples, the mosques in the area. They're really just trying to show them being super big assholes. They're more of like the real world ground level threat. They'll just harass them through the rest of the series. The clandestine group are like the supernatural villains on the show with the powers. Just a reminder that even though Iron Man and Stark Industries funded the creation of that damage control group, now they're controlled by the federal government. Stark Industries don't have anything to do with them, so Pepper Potts couldn't like give them a phone call and tell them to chill out. The other big part of the episode is just her brother's wedding, and most of that stuff is just meant to show you their version of like a modern, traditional kind of Muslim Pakistani wedding if you were to go to one in the United States in present day. Like just a normal wedding from their culture, even though the clandestine group winds up hijacking it later. There was actually a cameo scene during the wedding too. In the background here, this is actually the real-life showrunner of the series at Marvel. They also bring the cover band, Brown Jovi, because that's her parents' whole thing is that they love Bon Jovi. Also, the song that they use from Bon Jovi, obviously one of their more popular songs, Living on a Prayer, during the action scene. I was surprised they didn't use the Brown Jovi version of the song, though. They used the actual Bon Jovi song. And obviously the big thing is that Bruno gives the gift of the mask to Kamala Khan that she's going to wear in her Ms. Marvel costume, or like the next version of her costume that she makes for herself. But they set up episode 4 with her grandmother's phone call, just telling her and her mother to come back to Pakistan. Didn't you all see the train? Like I said, her mother probably would also have seen the train and just probably lying to Kamala about it. We'll also learn more about what happened that day on the train that her great-grandmother disappeared, and probably what happened with that other bangle. Also, next week in Pakistan is probably where we meet the Red Dagger character, who's in all the trailers. He's right out of the comics. He's like another Pakistani vigilante who Kamala gets to know. Now a lot of you are also asking, how does this backstory with the Djinn and the alternate dimension and the Shang-Chi characters connect with the Captain Marvel movies? Because I said the whole point in changing her Inhumans backstory to this new backstory was to make her flow more with what's happening in the Marvels movie. It sounds like there's going to be more cosmic stuff, more time runs out, more Secret Wars level stuff happening during that film. So because they're teasing in the Shang-Chi movie that there's this signal inside the 10 rings contacting someone or whoever created them in this alternate dimension, what they might do in the Marvels movie is have an interdimensional villain. Like they'll tease Galactus or some other huge threat from the comics coming from an alternate dimension like Annihilus or the Annihilation Wave or the Brood or something really crazy from an alternate dimension. And Kamala will just be tied to the mythology of whoever this new interdimensional villain winds up being in the movie. And Ms. Marvel will have all her powers, which will help her fight with Monica Rambeau and Captain Marvel during the movie. My assumption too is that they'll also explain how this is all connected to what's happening during the Shang-Chi movie, at least by the finale. They'll probably raise more questions than they answer, but we'll at least get a couple more answers. But if you have any big questions or are there any big Easter eggs in the episode that you spotted that I didn't talk about in the video, just write them below in the comments. Let me know how you think this is all connected to the 10 rings and this alternate dimension that they teased during that movie as well. My full Ms. Marvel episode 4 video will post next Wednesday. Because we just had the Obi-Wan Kenobi finale video, I don't have to delay episode videos or anything like that, so my Ms. Marvel episodes will post Wednesday mornings instead of posting Thursday mornings now. There's only 6 Ms. Marvel episodes, so there's only a couple more episodes left though. But then we'll be getting She-Hulk episodes. I'll do full episode videos for that. We also have the Star Wars Andor episodes. We have House of the Dragon. There's a lot of really big stuff coming up this summer, so we're all going to be eating really good. All my Thor Love and Thunder full Easter eggs for the entire movie, my post-credit scene videos, all that stuff that I do for all the regular Marvel movies, we'll start posting after it hits theaters, which will be in a couple weeks too. Everyone click here for my full Obi-Wan Kenobi episode 6 finale video, and click here for my new Thor Love and Thunder trailer video and Easter eggs. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.